Well, good morning, everyone. We'll get started. Good morning. I'm Jim Dunlop, and I'm one of the managing partners here at Admin Partners, and I'm really excited for today's presentation. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive here at the beginning on the economy, as we have often done, but we decided this year, as you'll recall if you came last quarter, to kind of pair our economic update with some more educational content. And so I'm really excited, first of all, to introduce Gretchen Duda, who's one of our financial advisors. Gretchen's certified financial planner, has been with us for 7, going on 8, 9 years. It just went so fast, it felt like 7. So we're going to ask Gretchen to kind of kick us off with kind of a quick update on this economy. It's been quite an interesting road here the last several months, as we all know. And then when Gretchen concludes, I'll bring up Christian Kreamer from Kreamer Funeral Homes in Annville. And our connection there is Gretchen's husband, Brian, works with them. And we had several clients ask us when we said what would be interesting to talk about or learn about. A few folks said, you know, I'd really like somebody to talk about what do you do when a loved one dies, or like right in the aftermath. We spend a lot of time worrying about wills and beneficiaries and estate planning, but there's some more practical things that have to happen, and some of us have been through that and others haven't. And so we thought it would be really great to have a conversation with Christian and have him share a little bit, and then have some time to converse. So without anything further, I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen Duda.
I can skip the introductions. So yes, I have been here for 9 years, and just really excited to talk to you today about the market. My goal isn't to overwhelm you with charts and numbers, but to give you a little more education about what these things mean and what it means for us as we move through it. So let's get started. So this chart shows the history of the U.S. stock market, specifically the S&P 500. So the S&P 500 is usually what people refer to as the market. The S&P 500 tracks the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the States. And what I want you to look at is the pattern. What pattern do we see? Markets go up, and then they go down. And then what happens? It goes up. And then what happens? It goes down. So I say it kind of funny because, you know, that is exactly what it does. And every time the market goes down, over time, it comes back up again. And it usually recovers to new heights. We're always at a new high. And with tariff concerns, geopolitical tension, and questions about the economy, markets have really been on edge in the last 2 years. You can see, you know, especially in this last section here, we dipped here, we dipped here, we dipped here, we dipped here. So there's a lot of up and down. But history reminds us that uncertainty is not permanent loss. So even though we have losses, we kick back up eventually. So that brings us to an important question, which is, after years of strong returns, is the stock market overpriced? And the short answer is, yeah, kind of. This chart looks at several different ways to measure that. And one of the things that we use is called the PE ratio, or price to earnings ratio. You might have heard your advisor talk about this in a meeting. You might have seen this chart in a meeting. But think of it this way, like if you were going to buy a business, you would want to know how much you're paying relative to what the business earns. And that's essentially what this ratio tells us. So right now, valuations are up. So the center line here, this is our 30-year average. And you can see we are one standard deviation at plus over that. So we are 21.3 times above earnings, meaning stocks are expensive, but right now companies are showing their value. The value is matching the expense. And so that's the trick here, that if companies are going to report strong earnings, then this is valid. But if it comes back, but they don't, if earnings disappoint, then that causes the volatility in the market. So the market isn't cheap, but it's not at an extreme bubble level. It's something to be aware of, not something to be panicked about. So then that moves us to inflation. And a few years ago, inflation was the word on everybody's lips. In fact, I remember doing a market update where I wrote, inflation on a piece of paper and held it up, and I was like, inflation, like everybody else talked about inflation. At its peak in mid 2022, inflation was running above above 9%, excuse me. So that this center mountain here, that's where we were. So, and it really felt like everything was going up at once, because you can see how quickly we climbed that inflation mountain, right? And this chart is great because it breaks down what causes inflation into different sectors: energy, food, shelter, core goods, services. They have auto insurance on here, which I think is wonderful. Like, I didn't really realize that auto insurance could be something that causes inflation to go up and down. I was like, oh, thanks. So the good news is that inflation has come down significantly from its peak in 2022. So we were all the way up there where I couldn't even reach, and we're down here now where I can reach. But this is what's concerning, is these two little green bars here at the end. So green is energy. And we know that it's going to be a lingering concern with the war in Iran, the conflict in the Strait of Hormuz. It's just, we know, if anyone's been to a gas pump in the last couple of months, we know that prices are going up. So it's going to put upward pressure, and we're just going to have to watch it, because we're not quite sure what's happening there. And that talks about then the Fed, because how do we combat inflation? The Fed, it's their job. The Fed lowers interest rates or increases interest rates depending on what they're trying to do. So the Fed's main tool is the federal funds rate. And when they raise it, borrowing obviously becomes more expensive, because then it costs more money to borrow. And when they lower it, money becomes cheap. So the chart here shows what the market expects the Fed to do with interest rates. Now you can see that's a really small shaded space. The market is not expecting the Fed to lower the rate dramatically. And if inflation can't get its act together, this won't move. At least it won't move down. So those are the two indicators that we are keeping an eye on. So everyone tracking, you guys are doing a great job. So consumer finances, and the financial health of the everyday American in this spread. So the picture is mixed. On a positive side, household balance sheets overall are in decent shape. Home values have risen significantly, though our stocks, the market is, going gangbusters. Portfolios have grown. The pandemic era included a lot of government support that helped families save, that helped families pay off debt, and build their savings. But the story isn't universal, and that's where we have the issue. Higher interest rates have made debt more expensive. So credit card balances and delinquencies have been rising and are now over pre-pandemic levels. Additionally, student loan payments have resumed, and that's adding pressure for the everyday household. So the balance sheet for everyday Americans looks good on paper, but underneath the surface, many families are feeling stretched, and you might be feeling stretched. That tension matters for the economy, because consumer spending is the engine that really drives a lot of the U.S. economy. So, and then if you want to feel better about yourself, let's look at the government spending balance sheet. They don't do as good of a job. And if you are surprised to hear this, the deficit is growing. I don't know if that's surprising to you, but so as you can see, the government they're spending more than they're bringing in taxes. So we have a deficit. I don't know if you can see that. That's $1.853 billion. I'm sorry, what?
Oh,
No,
8
that's
trillion?
a B. That's a B.
That's a trillion.
Total spending, the deficit is billion. Yes, fine.
It'll be $1 trillion next year.
Yeah. Well, you should say that, Christian. If you look here, the forecast for the national debt does not look good. If the government cannot get its act together, they're forecasting within the next 10 years, 120% increase in that debt. But what the number that catches my attention on this slide is down in that bottom left-hand gray box. It is the amount that the government is paying for their debt, the interest rate on the debt, which is 14%, which is more than they're spending in defense, more than they're spending at Medicaid, and almost not Medicare, but Medicaid. So it's not a crisis today. The US dollar is still the world's reserve currency. Investors around the globe still have faith in US treasuries. But it's a long-term issue that policymakers will eventually need to address because the forecast doesn't look good. If this was your budget, you would probably not feel real good about it. At least I wouldn't. Although if I had $1 billion, I could do a lot of good with that. So, when we talk about volatile markets, people love to talk to us about gold. Oh, I have gold. I need to buy gold. Everybody loves to talk about gold, and gold is great. It's we can see from the chart that gold has risen dramatically in the last year or two. Here, this green line, whoosh, up it goes. But what I want you to look at is here. So this is the annual returns versus the volatility of various investments, and they made gold is your yellow line. And a regular 60-40 portfolio is the dark green line. So what I want you to notice here is that gold, you can get a 6% return in gold for about a 15% volatility rate. For a 60-40 portfolio, you can get about a 9% return at a 9% volatility rate. Which feels better to you?
The second one.
Right, exactly. So, like I said, gold can play a role in a diversified portfolio. We don't hate gold. In fact, we have gold in some of our managed accounts right now, but it's of 100. It is not the whole thing. So it's a great as a hedge against inflation or crisis, but it should not be your only strategy. It doesn't pay dividends, it doesn't grow earnings, and it is one of the most volatile asset classes that you can have. So just keep that in mind. Everybody likes gold. So well. Okay. So the last few charts that we are going to look at are going to talk about a few investing principles that are important and worth noting. Because when we are in these uncertain times, which always feels like we're in uncertain times, right? When the market is super volatile, we hear a lot from clients about, oh, I need to get out of the market or I need to be more conservative. And that is not always the best strategy. And here's why. So this chart shows the range of investment returns across different holding periods. The bars represent the best and worst outcomes investors have experienced over a 1 year, a 5 year, a 10 year, and a 20-year rolling period. For a single year, over on the left, if you look at the green bar, you could have been up nearly 52% or down 37% in 1 year, which is unpredictable. The first chart that we looked at where the market went up and the market went down, I mean, market's bouncing on a pogo stick that year. But what happens if you compare that to 20 years? That green bar doesn't dip below zero. So in every single 20-year rolling period since 1950, a diversified portfolio has been positive every single year. So what does that tell us? It tells us, you don't have to answer it unless you want to. I was a teacher, but I don't have to call it. What that tells us is time is our friend. Time in the market is our friend, no matter what is happening. So okay. The other thing I want to point out too is in that green bar, you have a lot of feelings when we're down here. right?
Mm.
We get a lot of feelings, we get really emotional, we feel very unsettled. Now, when we feel, whoo, we're really excited when we're up there at the top, right? Everything's great, we're gonna make a bunch of money. So keep that in mind as we look at the next slide. So I really like this one too, because this will show you the impact of being out of the market. When markets start to go down, people call up their advisor, Chris, and they say, Chris, the market's going down. So-and-so got into office, the market's gonna crash. And Chris says, okay, well, what do you wanna do? I need to get out of the market. And Chris, in his advisor brain, is saying, no, no. But we want to make sure that our clients feel heard. So we say, okay, well, what do you want to do? And so Chris will then say, all right, well, listen, people who missed the best 10 days of the market missed out on over half of the annual returns that they could have gotten. So this first bar shows, and this is within the last 20 years. So remember the last 20 years. If you would have stayed fully invested in the market in a diversified portfolio, you would have seen 11%. If you would have missed just the 10 best days, that's cut in half. And if you go, it goes 20, 30, all the way down where if you missed 60 of the best days, you actually had a negative return. And this is what happens. Often history has shown that the best and the worst days of the market are usually clumped together. Okay, 6 of the best 10 days occurred within 2 weeks of the 10 worst days. So staying invested is your friend. I get it. The market is uncertain and we think that things are going to go a certain way, but the truth is staying invested is the best strategy. Yeah, thank you. I only have 2 like 2 slides.
You're up, D.
No, that's okay.
We're listening, we're listening.
Additionally, the reason why all of this is important is because, okay, yes, we are going to talk about death today, but you are also expected to live a long life, especially if you are a non-smoker and if you are in excellent health. Okay, so we've got women, men over on the left, and then the blue is at least one spouse of a couple, and the gray is both members of a couple. Okay. Retirement could be 35 to 40 years in length. That's a long time. I've been alive for 41 years. So you could have been retired for the last 40 years. And some of you might have been. 74% of women and 64% of men will live to see 85. There is a 90% chance that one spouse will live to 85 and a 74% chance that one spouse will live to 90. That's a long time. So we have to, when we're talking about time and staying invested, like we're doing it because y'all are just gonna keep living, which is great. We love to see it. And so that is why withdrawal rates matter. Okay. The withdrawal rate matters when it comes to utilizing investments utilizing assets in retirement. And so one popular rule of thumb in the investment world is the 4% rule. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it. Financial advisors typically don't like rules of thumb because everybody's situation is different, but this one really carries some validity to it. Across the top, you have different types of diversified portfolios. So like a 60-40 and 80-20. And on the left-hand side, you have withdrawal rates. And if you look, the 4% line, that was pretty good. You know, cash, listen, you can't win with cash. Cash is great and interest rates are high and that's wonderful, but you cannot beat inflation with cash. So that's why it only gets good when you start at 3% or lower. But if you're invested, the 4% rule really kind of works and it gets bad quick. I mean, you go down to 5 or 6% and you know, it doesn't look as good. So that is why working with someone who is able to help you plan for your withdrawals, making sure that we are not overextending our assets, that we are able to, you know, make sure that we're monitoring that is very important. And we also don't want you to have to make changes to your lifestyle. You know, if you're pulling out, what, 6% and things aren't looking good, you know, you're gonna have to make changes. And we don't wanna tell you that maybe you need a part-time job. Because that doesn't sound fun. So let me bring this all together as well. Volatility is normal. What we are seeing in the markets, we've seen before. Markets have gone down, markets have gone up. We've all survived. It is uncomfortable though, and it makes us all feel a certain way about it. But it doesn't mean that your long-term plans are off track. And then most importantly, don't make financial decisions in moments of emotional stress or uncertainty. And I will make this statement. This is an absolutely politically neutral statement. When Trump got elected in 2016, everybody thought the market was going to tank, right? Did the market tank? No. Market went up in 2016, 2017. In 2020, Biden got elected. Market's going to tank. What happened? Market went up. So there are people who love to have microphones and yell and scream and talk about things that are going on when history shows us that being in a diversified portfolio and staying invested is the best course of action for you. So that's the end of my presentation.
Oh, that's
To stay
wonderful.
here.
Keep going.
I did have a little blurb in my introduction, which I was really excited about because I was going to say something about, you know, death and dying, and as a person who's married to a funeral director, that I hear a lot about it, right? So, and as a financial advisor, we don't like to make guarantees. We don't make guarantees, in fact, but there is one guarantee that I can make for you, is that you will die. Right? I think when I grew up, I heard my dad would say, the only guarantees in life are death and taxes. But you will pass away, and somebody will be responsible for taking care of your body and taking care of your estate. And that's why we have Christian with us today. That's why we talk about, you know, our estate planning and making sure that you have money left over in retirement to make sure that you are well taken care of. So how am I doing on time? Good. Any specific questions about what I covered?
So you're saying if you have a portfolio.
Yeah.
And you needed to take some money out,
Mhm.
stay within that 4%. Is that what
So,
you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I am saying that it kind of depends. We would want to look at that. So, but like, yes, okay, maybe I am kind of saying that.
You are, 'cause that's in the green.
Yeah,
So-
so you're obviously, the less we take out of an asset, the better it grows. The
Alright.
longer that money is in,
That makes sense.
that it's in. That I am not saying,
that.
don't ever take money out of your retirement.
Right.
I'm not saying
Right.
that. I'm just saying it is something that we have to pay attention to, because
Right.
you are likely to live a long life.
Thank you.
I've been having the required minimum distributions for 4 years now. And I think this current year is at 4.2% or something like that. How high does that go as I age?
Oh, that's a great question.
It goes into the sixes.
50% when you're 115 years old.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
wait, Bill, I promise we'll all be retired by then, so.
It's not gonna be there.
You'll have to talk to somebody else.
And it does creep up, and it gets, when you get into your 80s, it gets into that 6, 7, 8%, and when you get in your 90s, it can be even more than that, and so. You certainly are gonna have to take it out at a rate much faster than what we would say is sustainable spend rate, but I also know that people tend to continue to save those, reinvest some of that, or give it away, depending on their circumstances, but yes, it's designed that by the time you hit 115, you have to take it all out. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Die already. Yeah.
No, does the
They changed it once in the last 10 years.
If you don't take the distribution?
like if you die and there's still money in there.
Oh, you set a beneficiary.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. If not, that's okay. Oh, wait, hold on, I do have to show you the disclosure.
Yes. Thank you.
If you would like to read these, we will be happy to email them to you, so that you can learn more about our disclosures.
Oh, it's right up near, where is it? Near the door.
So,
I hear you.
whole lot of time, we are going to have a
Also,
calculator.
feel free to get more
for
food and drink while you're.
So what you can do is to plug in different things, but it does show how much it goes up. If you put in like what percentage is your investments growing, like you put, say, 6%. And then you put in, what your end level was, and then your birth dates and that type of thing. It'll give you a chart showing how your RMDs are gonna grow. Goes down. It's interesting. The Wall Street Journal had said
Then I'll just send it
recently,
again.
if you have
Well, that's what it takes.
financial income or
It's free.
that's guaranteed the basic costs, you're better off to go to like 80, some 20. Or even 90-10 on stocks. Yeah. Good stocks at 12, so
Which works now.
yeah, it works now. I guess it's kind of hard to stomach though, when if you have like 70, 30, and then the market goes down. Oh my God, you're just gonna sit tight.
Yeah, folks, we're gonna move into our second part of the presentation, and again, I introduced Christian a little bit. I'll allow him to share a little bit more about his story, and let's kick off here. So, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a funeral director. I'm not married to Gretchen. She is married to a funeral director. That is not me. She actually babysat me. Well, that's a blow up her spot, but no, she's not. So thank you for having me. My name is Christian Kreamer, and I'm here to talk about death. And Gretchen had said death and taxes are the only two guarantees in life. Not everyone pays their taxes. So I think it's just death, unless you guys know something that I don't. I have my presentation broken down in a couple different sections. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, tell you about the company, and then of course we'll talk about the death aspect of things. So I'll move into a little bit about me. My background is I'm a 4th generation funeral director. So my great grandpa was licensed funeral director if they had licenses back in 1915. My grandpa was a funeral director, and my dad was a funeral director, and now I am a funeral director. I actually grew up above my family's funeral home for the first 10 years of my life, and that's kind of what got me into the profession. I went to Ambell-Cleona High School, class of 2014. It's in Lebanon County, just a little bit north of here. And at the time of graduation, I had worked in the family funeral home every summer in high school. Time of graduation, my dad was looking to make a succession plan. So he said, "Are you interested in taking over our funeral home business?" And I had just learned to drive, so I didn't know the answer to that. My plan, I said, I think so. I'm going to go down to business school, get a 4-year degree, and then kind of figure it out from there. Obviously, you know what happened there, but I started at the University of Central Florida in 2014, got a degree in business management. So I spent 4 years there and graduated in 2018. While I was there, I explored other careers. I worked for a financial firm, Lockheed Martin. I did an internship there, and nothing really spoke to me. So I decided, okay, next steps, I'll go to mortuary school. And that was 2018 to 2019. I graduated from the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science, where many of my funeral directors now also went to. My dad went to. My grandpa was a trader and he went to Cincinnati, but there are other funeral, professional schools out there. So I graduated with a degree in funeral service, arts and science. After that, I started an internship, I was licensed, and then ultimately took over the company. And then a little bit of some other things about me outside of the funeral industry. I have an experience running an Airbnb for 8 years. I am part of a golf simulator business in Anvil. So it's one of my passions outside of the company. Heavily involved in community service. So I'm on the board for Lebanon Family Health Services, board for Prevent Suicide PA, which is something I'm very passionate about. On the board for Friends of Old Anvil. I serve on the board for Mount Gretna International Film Festival, the Council for Leadership Lebanon Valley, which inspires young leaders in the county. I do a lot of presentations for the Aging Inspired Advanced Care Coalition in Lebanon, and I'm also a part of the Sertoma Club. So community involvement is something I'm very passionate about in my personal and professional career.
So I guess you're in Lebanon.
I'm in Lebanon, yes.
Okay,
Lebanon County, yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So history of our company. So we started in 1915 in York County, actually, it's Stewartstown, PA, 111 years ago. And in 1927, it was just my great grandpa and his brother, and the two of them ran the furniture and funeral store in Stewartstown. They eventually moved to Anvil because I guess Anvil at that time was an up and coming place. So they moved the furniture and funeral store combination.
Anvil.
Yeah, it still is not, but it's not up and coming. It's just there. Great place to live. Great place to live. But they moved to Anvil in 1927. It was a furniture funeral combo, which a lot of the family funeral homes that exist today started out there. And kind of a fun fact, we're one of the only handful of furniture and funeral businesses that still exist. So I have no involvement with furniture store, but Kreamer Brothers Furniture still exists in Anvil, believe it or not.
How does it go together?
So back in the day, they used to, the only people that could make caskets were furniture makers. So naturally, they were the undertakers as well. So it was two brothers, my great grandpa, his brother. They were doing that for many, many years, and then each side kind of got a little too busy. So then they branched off into two different businesses, funeral home and furniture store in 1950. That's when we purchased our current Anvil location in 1950. 1958, my grandpa took over from his father. 1984, my dad took over from his father. 1991, the business expanded. My dad started to grow the business. In 1997, he purchased another funeral home, which we still own. We are 2 locations. 2008, built a new facility. So that took the place of the existing Strauss, Kreamer, and Lum Funeral Home. Currently, it's just Kreamer and Lum Funeral Home. And most recently in 2022, I took over the fancy business. So that's a little bit of a history about our company. I'll introduce you to our staff. We have 6 funeral directors, including myself. And I think our biggest asset is longevity. We don't have any turnover at all. So that's where I kind of attribute the success of our business to, is we have a lot of people that know what they're doing in the area that they're doing it in. Dan, one of our funeral directors on the far left, he's been with our company for 25 years. Brian, 18 total. Probably around that, nearly 20 years. Yeah, he'll be many, many more. Steve Lum, nearly 40 years in the funeral industry. I'm the youngin in the middle. Heather has been with us a little over 10 years. Greg, over 28 years. And on the far right, Adam, our pre-need consultant, he's been with our funeral home for 12 years. So again, a lot of different people who know what they're doing and have been in this area for a very, very long time. We have 3 administrative assistants, 1 full-time crematory operator, and then a bunch of part-time help. So in total, I manage 22 employees. Current facilities, like I said, we have 2 locations, an on-site crematory, And most recently, we added a luncheon facility to our Jonestown location, so more of a community involvement room there in Jonestown. People ask me what our purpose is, and that I think is the toughest question that I get. If I were to sum it up in kind of one sentence, I would say that our job is most similar to a wedding coordinator, but with no rehearsal, and the wedding happens in 10 days or less. So that's kind of my take on the profession. But a lot of these guys wear many different hats day in, day out. So now to the death part of things. I'll first talk about at-need arrangements, and then I'll get into some pre-need arrangements and what that looks like for people. But I think it's important for people to understand the process of what an at-need arrangement is and what happens when a death occurs. So to start things out, one of the common, I think, misconceptions or unknown facts of the funeral industry is that the funeral home is responsible for taking in 99% of cases, is responsible for taking the person from where they die or where they are transported to, meaning a hospital, when they die, to the funeral home. I think a lot of people just magically think that the body appears at the funeral home, but that is an extremely important part of our business. One, because it's first contact with the family, and two, is because we're physically bringing somebody into our care. So that's just something many of you may have known that already, but I get that a lot when talking to people about this industry is, oh, the coroner brings them to the funeral home, or I've even had, oh, the family has to bring them to the funeral home. That's not the case. The funeral home takes the person into our care. And that could range from a lot of different facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, houses, backyards, cars, really where anyone passes away, it is our job to get them from A to B. And that's kind of a high level overview of what that looks like for us. But then once we have the person into our care, a lot of the real work starts. And that kind of all begins with funeral arrangements with the next of kin and family members of the deceased. People ask me what funeral arrangements look like. That could last anywhere from, I think the quickest one I've done is 15 minutes, longest one probably 6 hours. So it kind of depends on the family, their scenario, and what they're looking for. But at those at-need arrangements, what we do is our first goal is to educate you on all of the options that you have with regards to disposition and then a funeral or memorial service. So our job, educate people on what they can and can't do within the confines of the law. And then we carry out their wishes with the information that they give us. So first, education. The next thing that we typically ask, or one of the big questions we ask, is with regards to disposition. So that refers to burial or cremation. There are other forms of disposition that I won't get into because they're few and far between, but you could talk about green burial, aquamation, those types of things, nuance subjects. But
I'm sorry, what's aquamation?
aquamation is the
Put you in
process
a bottle.
of cremation,
Put you
but
in a
with
bottle.
hydrolysis, and that's using water instead of heat.
Fire.
Yep. So that's something that is that exists today too. But for the purpose of our discussion, I'll talk about burial cremation because that's going to apply to all of you guys, unless you have other plans. We can talk about that too. But disposition, that's the main question. And then we'll talk about what happens to your remains, whether that's a burial in a cemetery, scattering at a location, retention of cremated remains. You cannot retain a casketed body that has to be buried, but cremated remains can stay in your house. So those are things that we kind of discuss with you. The other thing that we'll do is we'll collect vital statistics for an obituary if you choose to have one, and death certificates, which you don't have a choice. You have to file for a death certificate. We'll also plan and coordinate funerals, viewings, visitations, burials, luncheons, any sort of events that you'd like to have. We contact the key players in things, so we'll contact pastors, cemetery caretakers, organists, soloists, the church, military honors if you're a veteran, traffic police, any people that have involvement in that event, we take care of coordinating that for you. As you probably could imagine, with a death, there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be filed. That's not something that you have to worry about. We take care of those things for you as well.
Such as like paperwork.
Paperwork would be death certificates. There's a lot of things on our end that we need to file for if you have a funeral that takes place outside of 10 days in the state of Pennsylvania.
Do you contact like
That-
social security?
Yep, so that's the next thing that we provide you. So at the time of your passing, we sit down with your family, and that's one thing that we provide to them is literally a document that says things you may not have thought about when a death occurs and how we can help with that. One, and probably the first question I always get is social security. The funeral home is responsible. Well, they're not responsible for it, but if they're a good funeral home, they will do that for you and contact social security and get those things straightened out for you with regards to that. Your vehicle. People come in and they were asking, what do we do with mom's car? Her name's on the title and registration. We are able to provide you with a form that takes their name out of the title and registration of the vehicle. Over the years, we compiled a list of things that people were coming into us and saying, how do we do this? You know, outside of plan my funeral, it got into social security, mom's car, veterans benefits, you know, all of those things that are relevant to the death of an individual. If we can't answer those questions, we'll point you in the direction of somebody who's licensed to do so. But our goal is to take as much off of your plate time of their passing so that you can focus on being with your family, friends, loved ones, and really being with yourself and going through that grieving process. So that's really important to us. We try and take a lot off of your plate. Anything that we can do for you, we're willing to do. So
Thank you.
and I can get more into that later too, but that's kind of an overview of the funeral arrangement conference. Now we'll talk about pre-need arrangements and what that looks like. And the best way I can describe pre-need arrangements is it makes everything on the slide before a lot easier for your family. So when we sit down and go through the process of making pre-need arrangements for an individual's death and what that looks like for them and their family, all of the things that we review ahead of time. Those are things that you can review with a pre-need specialist. So we have one on our staff, or if you have a previous relationship with a funeral director, or you know somebody personally that works for our company, a lot of times families request to meet with them personally, and we accommodate that as well too, based on your schedule and our schedule. So you're going to sit down with a funeral director or a pre-need specialist, and really it's a process of asking questions, thinking about things, and kind of getting a plan in place for when that time inevitably does come. Now, with pre-arrangements, I think it's important to stipulate that you do not have to prepay for a funeral. There's a difference between pre-arranging and prepaying. You can do one, you can do one without doing the other. So, and most of the time it's people that come in that pre-arrange with us, but they aren't in a situation, or they're not ready to maybe prepay for things. It's important to let people know that you do not have to prepay when you sit down with somebody and pre-plan. If that makes sense.
Is that just your funeral home, right?
That is all funeral homes. You're not under any obligation to come in and prepay when you sit down with the funeral director and pre-plan. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Yes.
What if the funeral home goes out of business and you've prepaid? Is there some insurance that you
Yep.
can get?
Great question. So you are not actually, so say you're prepaying with my funeral home. That money, after 1984, it changed. back before 1984, that money would go directly to the funeral home. Then antitrust laws came in. Now that money goes into an irrevocable pre-need trust. With our funeral home, it's with Fulton Bank. Okay, so that money, when you prepay with our funeral home, goes to Fulton Bank in a pre-need irrevocable trust. And I'll get more into that too, the financial aspect of things, because I think that will be most of your questions, but that money does not go into the funeral home's bank account.
So that's insured basically for the family.
Yes, and it is transferable too. So say you would prepay with Kreamer Funeral Home in Anvil. 10 years later, you move to Orlando, Florida, pass away in Orlando, Florida, and you're like, well, I paid with Kreamer Funeral Home, so I guess I'm going to have to go back up to Kreamer Funeral Home to have my funeral or cremation. That's not true. Those funds are accessed with your death certificate only. The only way you can access those funds is with the individual's death certificate, and then those funds are directly transferable to the funeral home or crematory that you would be at. So that's important to note as well, and I think you guys will have a lot of questions regarding that. But we see that a lot, where somebody prepays with us, they move out of state, they decide they're going to do a simple cremation down in Florida. We then transfer the money to the other funeral home to pay for their expenses. So those things are important to note too. But as far as prepaying the funeral goes, like I said, when you prepay with a funeral home, that money cannot be accessed without a death certificate. So it's very important to know that that money is irrevocable. When you put that money in a pre-need trust and you sign the paperwork to do that, you cannot get that money back to invest it somewhere else. Or we've had people say, you know, I've fallen on harder times, I need that $5,000 back. It is irrevocable and it is in a pre-need trust. The only way you can access that is after your death. The funeral home submits a death certificate to the trust, and then that money is released to pay for funeral expenses. So some advantages to pre-planning / prepaying. Obviously, financial is one of the big ones. So when you prepay with our funeral home guarantees the cost of the casket and service or urn, merchandise, and service. So what that means is, say you come into me today and prepay with our funeral home in 2026. The funeral home is guaranteeing that you will not pay a single dollar more for that casket and service, say you die 10 years in the future and our prices increase. Now, this gets a little bit confusing because there are things that are involved in a funeral that are called cash advance items. Those are things that we do not have control over. That would be cost of flowers, cost of a newspaper obituary, cost of an opening and closing of a grave. All of those things, we cannot guarantee the prices of that. We can guarantee the cost of the casket, service, or other merchandise. So one advantage to prepaying is you're locking in that price at that time. You will not pay another dollar for casket, service, or merchandise with our funeral home. So we're able to guarantee the costs there. Another advantage to setting aside money for a funeral is that a nursing home or a personal care facility cannot access those funds. So again, when you put money aside in a pre-need trust, the only way to get that is with a death certificate. Nursing homes, personal care facilities will not have your death certificate because you are still living. You cannot access those funds without the death certificate. Therefore, a nursing home, long-term care facility cannot access those funds if you would, owe them money at the time. Another thing that we see is that people spend money or put aside money for a funeral for Medicaid spend down. And what that means is that at the time, they're trying to decrease their assets so that they can qualify for Medicaid. So a lot of people will put aside money to eliminate or set aside those assets, not eliminate them, but set aside into a specific funeral trust so that they can qualify for Medicaid care at the time. So that's another advantage. Another thing would be financial planning. So again, this cost is unavoidable. And it's a good way to plan for the future for you and your family with a financial advisor. Again, something that you or your family is going to be responsible for, and it's a good way to kind of get your financial planning in place for when that time does come. Another thing too, it eliminates family burden. Once again, these costs are unavoidable. So whether it is you prepaying for your funeral or your family's friend or somebody's going to pay for your funeral. And or cremation, whatever your desires are. Those costs are unavoidable. You are going to die, and your family or yourself is going to be responsible for the cost of dying. There was a cost for being born, and there also is a cost for dying too. So cost for everything, of course. Another advantage too would be the emotional aspect of it. So, you know, with regards to the emotional peace of mind for loved ones, when they have those plans in place, as a funeral director, I've seen a lot of fights and arguments and disagreements break out in, surrounding somebody's death. I can tell you that nearly none of them have been with a service or a cremation or a funeral that is pre-planned and prepaid. A lot of that comes from lack of preparation, financial disagreements, things that families are going to fight about. We don't see that a lot when things are taken care of ahead of time. Also, selfishly, it is peace of mind for the funeral director. So our goal is to serve you the best that we can. When we have a whole file that tells us how we can serve you well, that really gives us confidence going into, making those funeral arrangements with you. And also peace of mind for your loved ones. The last thing that people want to do is come into the funeral home and see us and make a lot of decisions on your behalf. That gives them kind of the out that you made those decisions yourself. Like I said, prevents conflict and reduces emotional stress. So those are just a lot of the pre-need advantages to kind of having this conversation before it's needed. And then lastly, I'll talk a little bit about post-funeral personal affairs and how we can help with them. A lot of times people will call in and they'll ask or say words such as probate, will and estate, short certificates. There's an easy answer for us as the funeral home, and that is to get a lawyer. We're not trained and qualified on will and estate, probate, the aspects of those things, and we don't pretend to be. So we always encourage, if you're going to have a will and estate, to get those things arranged ahead of time with a lawyer and a professional who can educate you and take you through that process. The funeral home will certainly be able to connect you with people if that's your goal, but if you do that ahead of time, it makes things a lot easier. People call in and say probate, will, and estate, and our easy answer is, we're not qualified and trained or educated enough to kind of give you advice on those topics. Little kind of side note with personal experience and something that I'll just throw out there to you. Cancel your credit cards after you experience a death. Also, cell phone. My dad passed away last year, and we experienced fraud 3 different times after the death because my mom wasn't, thinking about those things at the time. So just from a personal experience, make sure you have a plan about the credit cards and phone. My dad's phone number got hacked, and Verizon, sent us a bill for $30,000 with a bunch of tablets that people bought. Then his credit card was hacked, and a group from Atlanta took a cruise on it. So just kind of keep those things in mind as a family member. You want to keep a close eye on those things and submit death certificates to phone company, credit card company to avoid fraud as much as possible. Seems like in this day and age, fraud is pretty unavoidable. There's a lot of things that are out there that make it hard to ignore, but those are just 2 kind of personal side notes for that. And then post-funeral grief management. No matter what type of loss that you're going to experience, you will, if you had a personal relationship with that person, you will experience grief, whether that's whatever that looks like for you. I would encourage you to talk to a mental health professional. A lot of our funeral directors go to therapy. We have a pretty tough job. We see things day in, day out that most people don't. And I'm just a huge proponent and advocate for seeking mental health counseling, therapy, psychologist, whatever that looks like for you. I think that that's a huge thing. And I think that everyone should do that before they need it, and especially after they do. It's just something that has helped me personally, and I think it's helped a lot of other people on our staff too. And we've seen it with people that we manage. A lot of times people get kind of caught up in the funeral, finances, planning, luncheons, all those types of things. When those things are over, that's when the real stuff kind of hits you. And I think it's an important thing to keep that in mind too when dealing with the death of family member, friend, cousin, aunt, uncle, dog, cat, doesn't really matter. A lot of people, if you're human, you're going to have some sort of emotional response to that. So keep that in mind too. But that's it for me. And I'm assuming you guys will have some questions, so I'm happy to answer those. You can see the disclaimer at the bottom too. The private thing.
Getting anxious to do the.
Yes, so we see that a lot. We take care of the transport of that, whether that, so if you give me an example, I can better help you out with that. But short answer would be if you're going to want to get cremated remains from Pennsylvania to Florida, let's just use those two states as an example. We actually are able to ship the cremated remains using USPS. It's a very common thing. You're also able to take those cremated remains across state lines in a vehicle or an airplane, and we give you the documentation to do that. So yes, we coordinate and facilitate the cremated remains getting from A to B, wherever that may be. We've even shipped cremated remains to Italy, for example. It always is through USPS. So.
And when you were talking about cremation, you mentioned some kind of water.
Aquamation.
Would that still leave ashes?
Yes, it does. So what happens with cremation and aquamation, the end product is exactly the same. And some people can't really fathom that, and I won't get too sciencey on you, but with aquamation and cremation, what happens is your body is reduced to its natural elements, which is carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, missing it, hydrogen. There you go, hydrogen. Yeah, missing third or fourth. So that happens with aquamation and cremation. And they're exactly the same with, if I had cremated remains here from aquamation and cremated remains here from cremation, you would not be able to tell the difference between the two. Yep.
Is the cost the same?
That would depend on the funeral home. I would say in most cases, aquamation is going to be more expensive at the time because it is less available for people. We do not have the capability to do aquamation. I think don't quote me on this, but I believe it was passed 2 years ago in Pennsylvania to be legal. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 facilities that have it.
What's the average cost of a cremation?
Cremation, so average in the United States,
Yeah.
Average cost of cremation is a little under $2,800 for a direct cremation. With our funeral home, that's different, but you can go to a funeral home in Pennsylvania that has a direct cremation for $775.
What's direct? Is that like without your pets, without other people being mixed in the mix?
Direct would just be essentially picking you up from the facility.
You know how they do with dogs? You
Yep,
find a
yep.
director, is it a group package?
Yeah. No. So, yeah, direct cremation is cremation without services. Okay, so that would essentially just be the funeral home cremating you and giving the cremated remains back to you. In a lot of
So
cases,
that's about $77,000.
no. So I'm saying in Pennsylvania,
Okay,
there's a crematory,
okay,
and there may be one even cheaper, but they will do a direct cremation for you. They will cremate you for $775
700.
flat. Okay,
That's a
take
bargain.
that to it with comparison to ours. Ours is about $3,700. You may ask what the difference is in those, right? Why am I paying $3,000 more at your funeral home versus a cremation society that's paying $775?
Okay,
A lot of times that $775, that gets you nothing. Does not get you an appointment with the funeral director. It does not get you them writing the obituary. It does not get them to collect your death certificate information. It's essentially saying
right.
funeral home's gonna cremate you, you're gonna do all the work for it. So that's the difference. With our funeral home and a lot of other funeral homes, a direct cremation entails filing death certificates, writing obituaries, meeting with the family, taking care of your life insurance policies, your pensions, your annuities, your vehicles, all of those things is what we define as service.
Right.
Direct cremation for a $775 firm is essentially just a disposition. We're gonna take you crematory, give them back to the family. That's it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there legal restrictions regarding cremated remains?
A ton of them. Yep. Yep. There are a ton. One that I always get is where can you scatter cremated remains? So like, I want to be scattered at Yankee Stadium or Lambeau Field in Green Bay or all those things. The short answer to where you can be scattered is wherever the owner of the property approves that to happen, okay? So I'll give you a quick story. About a year ago, I had a gentleman die. In his prearrangements, he said, scatter me at this address. It was my first house. He had since moved away from that 30 years ago. I went up to the front door of the house, knocked on the door, talked to the owner of the house. I said, hey, I'm from Kreamer Funeral Home. Here's what this guy's wishes were. You can say, absolutely not, and I'll walk off your porch right now. And that is, well within your rights. I was kind of shocked when he said, hey, plan a time, come to my backyard, scatter them wherever you like. So I told the family, yep, they were extremely accommodating. We scattered the cremated remains in his backyard. I had gotten to talking with the guy. Now this is extremely rare, but I thought I'd be like key lime pies, so I sent him a key lime pie on behalf of the family. And I was like, thanks for letting me do that. I was really shocked when he was like, come on over. So bringing that all back, you are able to scatter cremated remains wherever you are permitted to. So, or have permission to do that on the owner of the property.
So like national parks or something like that?
National parks and like Central Park gets a little tricky. The answer to that is no. However, I know families that have gone to Central Park. One of my family members included, my cousin passed away, and my aunt was adamant that some of her cremated remains would be scattered in Central Park, and I was not there, but I didn't stop her, because that's something that was her decision, but technically that was illegal to scatter cremated remains in Central Park because I don't even know who owns Central Park. And if you go and ask whoever owns it, they're gonna say no because it's a public park. Same with probably like a national park, and that's what federally owned. So good luck trying to get an answer for that.
Body of water.
Body of water depends. So I actually have permission from Anvil Township to scatter cremated remains in the creek that runs through our town for people, because people were coming to me and saying, just scatter mom in your backyard. And I thought that would be a terrible look to just scatter cremated remains on the property of a funeral home. It just kind of looked like I'm disregarding them or like not caring about them. So I called the township and I explained, and they said, if you have a scenario where somebody wants you to dispose of cremated remains on your own, you can go down to the creek and scatter in the creek. So I will actually be doing that again in July. I do it about once a year. So.
House beats downstream.
So if you think about it, cremated remains are completely harmless, right?
Yeah.
Carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, that's all that's in that, that's in you right now. It's in everything now, so.
They had some fertilizer value.
Yeah, they won't even do that, so it's just cremated remains, it's not, they're more of a, like pebbles rather than ashes.
Yeah.
People say, oh, mom's ashes, they're not ashes at all, actually, so.
They're pebbles.
More so like a fine sand, or a thicker sand, more pebble-like, so. When people say ashes, they're not even ashes, and yeah.
So what happens to, we get to a certain age and we all have like these knees and shoulders and.
Yeah, good question.
Titanium pieces, what happens to them? Do you like give them back to the family?
No,
Or-
I did that last month. The family said mom has a hip replacement or a knee replacement, one of the two, and they said we want that back. So we said, okay, had a signed form, we cremated, we were able to get the joint replacement, anything that's left in, so that's gonna be left in the crematory, right? Any
Oh,
metal is going to be left in the crematory. When we take the cremated remains out to process, we just separate that item, clean it, and give it to the family back in a bag.
And if the family doesn't want it,
Family does not want it, we recycle it, so we have a service that comes and picks up those medical
that's
devices
good, because that's,
for recycling.
yeah,
Now,
where they go.
candidly, we get money for that and we donate that to charity. Other funeral homes, they are entitled to keep that, and so if you're really concerned about that and you have a funeral home, ask them what happens, because they could take that money and pocket it. Not a lot of money, I'll tell you that, but they could do
That's
that.
nice of you.
But yeah, we put that in a fund and then we donate that to charity. But people ask us what we do and we let them know that too, so.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anything else?
Okay, Kristen, thank you for sharing about fraud.
Yeah.
My family learned the hard way not to put in obituaries like towns of where we live.
Yep.
We were all at a funeral
Yep.
and my aunt
Oh.
Bill's house got broken into.
Yeah.
So just as a heads up, that
Mm.
can and will happen in this area, and
Yeah.
we now have house sitters.
Yeah, good call.
Get a neighbor, have them
Yeah.
sit on your porch while you guys are at a funeral, because
That-
it's devastating.
That's a really great point, because back in the day, when my dad in 1984, he took over the business. If you look at an obituary from the 80s, early 90s, they say John Smith died at 123 Main Street, Anvil, PA 17003. They include the address in the obituaries.
Yeah.
We don't do that any longer. We have not included an address. You can put anything in an obituary. So if the family said, I want the address in there, we would do it. But we warn them that that's something that people look for. What happened was we just included dates, normal stuff in the obituary, my dad's obituary, not addresses or anything. But they were able to take that, and with information they had, were able to pose as him to Verizon and get his number transferred to another device. So there's crazy stuff that can happen. You just want to be kind of aware of that, so.
Christian, one final question. Can you explain who's responsible for contacting the funeral home when someone dies at home
Mhm.
and when someone dies in a facility,
Yeah.
like a nursing home or a hospital?
Yeah, good question. So it all depends on the scenario you're in. One scenario you may be in is hospice, okay? If you are under hospice care, one of the first questions that you're asked when you are put under hospice is what funeral home will your family choose when the time comes? Hospice will then contact the funeral home. It's not your sister or your daughter calling the funeral home to call them and let them know that mom passed. Hospice is the one that would call in that scenario. Say you're in a hospital and you're inpatient in a hospital for 2 weeks, the hospital will ask you, what funeral home do we contact upon your death? The hospital will contact us, specifically security at the hospital. If you're in a nursing home, when you get admitted to a nursing home, I guarantee that they're going to ask, what funeral home do we contact upon your passing? In that case, the nursing home calls us. Now, in a very hopefully rare scenario, you have an unattended death. So say you're asleep in your bed next to your wife, you pass away, your wife wakes up, and you're deceased there. The first thing you should do if you're in that scenario is call the police, call 911. The funeral home, if you call the funeral home, we are just going to say call 911, or have you contacted the police yet. Police then come out, and then typically, depending on your county, the coroner will come out, pronounce you, and then the coroner will call the funeral home.
Any funeral, I mean, what if you don't have any connections to any funeral home?
Yep.
It's just a local person? or-
So speaking from Lebanon County, if you do not have connections with a funeral home and you die unattended at home, more than likely, they're going to take you to Wellspan Good Samaritan Hospital, which doubles as our morgue in Lebanon County. You will then sit there until your family makes a decision on what funeral home is going to be taken. So we've had families that are in that scenario, person dies, they're in the morgue there, and then the hospital holds them for 20+ days in their
Wow.
refrigeration
Oh
system,
my God.
which does not do a great job at, preventing decomposition. And then they'll price shop. We have families that will call multiple funeral homes and say, what's your prices? What's your prices? And then they'll ultimately 20 days later make a decision. That body is then released to the funeral home. So you do have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether that is a funeral home or a cremation society, you do have to go somewhere to be either buried, cremated, or aquamated, or any of that stuff. So, yeah, the hospital will not do that.
Funeral fires, right?
No funeral pyres, no Viking chip burials, none of that stuff. So,
Mhm.
unfortunately, so great question, yeah. So the doctor will sign the death certificate. Now, you may ask what doctor, half the time we don't know because medical facilities are so unorganized, but we find out eventually who the doctor is signing the death certificate. If you're under hospice, it's easy. If it was an unattended death, it's easy, it's the coroner. But yeah, a primary care physician and the deputy coroner, they sign the death certificate. The funeral home registers the death certificate. Funeral director signs it as well as somebody who's registering the certificate, but we are not pronouncing and certifying. That's done by a medical professional. Most of them, yeah. Well, they used to be, we'd have to drive paper, or not paper to the doctor's office and wait till the doctor signs it. It's all electronic now, meaning we submit those things online. However, we have to like fax and then serve worksheet to the doctor, then the doctor gets that back to us, then we have to submit that electronically to the state. So there's different processes that involve that, but yeah, anyways.
Are you gonna have handout?
Did I bring business cards? I thought that'd be a bad thing. I'm still gonna call it something.
Do you come out to get
I
your
do,
card?
yeah. Just look up Kreamer. I'm pretty sure.
All right, hey, everyone, thanks, let's Kristen, a big round.
A dark but light subject at the same time for the way we approached it today, so we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will be back next quarter. I don't know if we've set the date yet, but stay tuned. And we really appreciate y'all being here, and have a wonderful summer. If I don't see you, finally getting some beautiful spring weather, and summer's right around the corner. So yeah, take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.